there! Thanks for joining me again. It is the end of July. God, can you believe it? I don't know when I'm going to post this video. Probably a week later. End of July. Really went fast. I'm pulling up my list of books that I keep, and this is the first month that I've delineated in my list that I just make starting at the beginning of the year. This is the first time I've remembered to delineate like what month it is, because I don't care what month I'm reading books in, but I don't know. I just decided if I could do it then, because I tried to do it in May. So any of these books that I read in July, you've already heard about. Most of them I've talked about in the last video that I've posted. However, I did want to circle back on Nevada by Imogen Biddy, because I think I was in the middle of reading it the last time I talked about it. I highly recommend this book. It was written 10 years ago. Imogen is a writer, but she hasn't written another novel. And I really loved the fact that she chose to call this story Nevada, because most of it takes place, if I'm not mistaken now, in New York City. And she is, the main character is a trans woman. We start the story, she starts telling us the story, or the close third person narrator tells us that she's in this relationship, and then that doesn't last for very long, and she's wanting to just break out, get out of the city. And you find as you read the story why it's called Nevada. And I love the scene that occurs in Nevada, and just think it's extraordinary. The author's note at the end of the book is a must read, because it just brings it all together. It's Imogen reflecting on the story 10 years later. I really felt like that last segment of the book in Nevada, it was so poignant, because it just, in the action of what's happening, it reveals even more about the main character, who I cared a lot about, and how no matter where you go, good things, weird things, unpleasant things are going to happen. But sometimes the importance is the journey itself, is getting out of a place that you've been and putting yourself into new situations. So I highly recommend. Okay, that's one of the books that I hadn't followed or followed back up on that I wanted to talk about. What have I been reading? Okay, I'm going to start off with, this looks like a lot, but I'm just going to talk about some stories in a couple books that have short stories in them, which I am not a short story reader, so I don't know what I've been doing in the last couple weeks. I was led to this book of short stories by Kate Chopin. It's The Awakening in selected short fiction, because somebody commented about another story of hers, another short story that I should read after I talked about The Awakening. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're watching, one moment, I'm going to probably edit this out. The Story of an Hour. The Story of an Hour is like 2 pages long. And I feel like it's one of those short stories that's a demonstration of how to write as short a story as possible, with a beginning, a middle, and an end, with an arc, establish characters enough so that you have a little bit of footing, but that you're dropped in and then you leave the characters' lives. That's what kind of story The Story of an Hour is. It vaguely felt familiar, like I had read it in a literature class or something, because it is so exemplary of the thing I just described. Yeah, I'm really glad I was led to that story. She is a master short story writer. I highly recommend. Thanks for leading me there. Another short story book that I was led to by a booktuber. I will leave it in the notes. But I've heard of Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahari. Haven't you? We've all heard of this book. It's been in the ether for quite a while. When was this written? 2019? Winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Now, I never know whether that means the book or the author when they have this thing here, but I'm going to assume it was this book. I heard, I think it was Charles from Seesop talking about how he was blown away. This is one of his favorite books of all time. And I thought, man, I'm not a short story reader, but I'm so impressed by the way he's talking about this book. I'll try it. And let me just point to a couple stories. I didn't read all of the stories. I was blown away by the first story, A Temporary Matter. Really nuanced, complex experience in this couple's life in a short story that starts off with the fact that they get a notice that the electric company has to shut off their electricity every evening for 2 hours or something, or 3 hours. Oh yeah, it was for 5 days. And that allows this couple, they decide that during this time that the electric is off, they're going to play a game. And the game is they're going to tell each other something that they've never told the other person. And first it starts off with funny things like, I never told you that when we first met, I had mistakenly taken something from the grocery store without paying for it. And I saw that in the parking lot and I never went back, or something like that. Like just little things. But then over 5 days, they trust each other a little more. They see that they're able to accept what each other is saying, and then it just gets more important. And by this framework of having the 5 days and revealing things, we learn what's actually happened, what this couple has experienced recently. It's insane. I did read Interpreter of Maladies, which is a really wonderful story to read. I always like reading the title of the book, the story that's the title of the book. And again, starts off on this level of seemingly interesting, simple framework. And then it goes from there. That's all I'm going to say about that one. We meet the interpreter of maladies, somebody who accompanies people as they're visiting a doctor in this area of India because they speak a different language than what's spoken in that particular area. And then I read a story called Sexy, which is about someone who is seeing a married man, and she's sharing this with her friend, and how that evolves over the time that we're reading it, and her insight to the situation evolves. I highly recommend this book. I know it's been around everywhere, but if it's just gotten off your radar, pick it up, try it out. You will not be disappointed by at least one of the stories, and I would love to hear your experience of this book. And then I read The Body Artist, which I saw somewhere, someone talking about it, by Dawn DeLillo. This is now my second Dawn DeLillo, and I didn't know anything about it. I just heard someone talking about it, or I read a description on Instagram, and I thought, well, I didn't realize it was so short, but it sounded interesting. It's about a body artist who is living with an artist, and they're many decades apart age-wise. This was published in 2000 or 2001. And it says, in the spare, seductive novel, he inhabits the muted world of Lauren Hartke, an artist whose work defies the limits of the body. Her and this artist live on a lonely coast in a rambling rented house, and he passes away. And you get this opening scene of them in the kitchen, which is so excellently written, of every nuance and unspoken thing that a couple does especially when they've been together for a while. Every time she had to bend and reach into the lower and remote parts of the refrigerator, she let out a groan, but not really every time, that resembled a life lament. She was too trim and limber to feel the strain, and was only echoing Ray is that older artist partner, identifyingly groaning his groan, but in a manner so seamless and deep, it was her discomfort too. What? And then, so Ray dies, and then we know that simply because he, Don DeLillo, inserts the obituary. Ray Robles, 64, cinema's poet of lonely places. He's found dead, and he was 64 and she's 36 or something. She returns to this rambling rented house in a remote place, and her friend is worried about her and doesn't want her to be by herself. It says, she woke early every morning, and this was the worst time, the first murderous instant of lying in bed and remembering something and knowing in the flow of the same breath what it was. I just love his use of the first murderous instant of lying in bed. You know, when you remember that this person, this loved one, is gone. Then the book gets a little strange. I don't think it's a spoiler to say, but if you don't want to know anything else, just skip ahead. But I don't think it's a spoiler to say, she discovers this odd man-like being in her house. And he's a weird one. I can't even explain it. Is he really human? Is he an image that's not real and she's seeing him? I mean, she buys him shoes, so there's that. It was so weird that I put it down and I thought, I don't want to read this. And then I looked up the book to see what other people thought about it, and it's well received. And I loved the writing up until the point of the little man who she calls Mr. Tuttle. So I just kept on reading and enjoying the writing, but I wasn't really into this other strange person showing up, this strange figure who disappears and appears. And read it for the writing is all I can say. It's so beautifully done. The only experience I have of Don DeLillo is White Noise, which is really funny and very well written. The prose, the interior experience of people, I felt like he did so well in White Noise. This doesn't have dialogue in it, but it has that minute interior, the expression of the minute interior experience of, in this case, someone grieving, but it's also done with a light touch. I felt like this was written by one of many of the contemporary female writers that I've read, but it's Don DeLillo, so check it out. I'd like to know if you've read this and what you thought of Tuttle. Okay, then I'm going to start talking faster. I am almost done with Margaret Drabble's The Millstone. This is my first Margaret Drabble, and I had heard about this. I mean, I own this book, so I've picked up a couple Margaret Drabbles because I thought she was an author that I wanted to read. I think this was written in the 60s. She was born in 1939. This is her second book. Yeah, it's from 1965. And I also have her other book, Jerusalem the Golden. And this is about Rosamond finds herself pregnant after her only sexual encounter. That's not a spoiler. This is what the entire book is about. This happens pretty early. And I am such an admirer of Rosamond, such an admirer of her. I don't want to say too much about this book, but I will say that I love this directness of, it's a third person narration, but I love the direct and clear, immediate type of writing. I don't even know if that makes any sense, but that's my experience of it. We see her bravery and her determination that she doesn't even know where that's coming from, but it is. She's going to have this baby. And it's just interesting to watch her. We get to see her evolve over the 9 months, and then after her child is born, and her relationships with her men friends and her female friends. Quite an experience. This was talked about on the Backlisted podcast. That's an excellent That is an excellent episode. I started listening to it, and now I'm going to go back and listen to it after I finish. Okay, and I started 2 books that I don't know whether I'm going to continue or not. I started Elizabeth Bowen's The Death of the Heart. This was written by contrast to Margaret Drabble. I think it was written in the 40s. Let me just check. 1938. And it is broken down into 3 parts. The world, part 2, the flesh, part 3, the devil. So that's intriguing. Shortly after, 16-year-old Portia comes to stay with her cool, elegant relations. And the relations are Anna and Thomas. So this is a little bit hard to describe who Anna and Thomas are to Portia. But nevertheless, Portia is coming to stay with her relations because her mother has died and her father had died before that. And you get this scene in the beginning with Anna and her friend that set up the fact that Portia has come to live with them. She's only supposed to stay a year. She's kind of odd. She's been brought up in some remote area and is used to being on her own, mostly with her mother. So I like the way that it started by just dropping you in and you learning about the situation through this conversation that takes place with Anna and her friend on a bridge in London in the freezing cold. It's taking a while to get going, and sometimes I like the way she's writing and sometimes I don't. I'm about 80 pages in now, and it took 70 pages, and it took me a while to get there. So I don't know yet. I'll keep you posted. And then I started a Siri Hustvedt novel called Memories of the Future. This is very literary. It's about it's an unnamed woman, S.H., who moved to New York City in 1978. She's living in an apartment that she can afford, so she's got a bit of a crazy lady on the other side of the wall named Lucy. And Lucy talks to herself, and not to herself, she's like screaming at people that aren't there. She's having a psychotic breakdown, it feels like, every evening, and sometimes she chants, and she's very loud. But S.H. has learned to live with this because she knows Lucy just needs to be Lucy. She's not going to stop. And S.H. is looking back on herself like 30 or 40 years later, and she was trying to write a novel the whole time she's in this apartment. She's given herself a certain amount of time. So she's looking back so we get pieces of the novel that was written, and we also get pieces of a journal that S.H. kept while she was at that apartment. So we have S.H. in the present, we have her journal from 1978 and 79, and we have this novel that she attempted to write. And it's crazy, it's interesting. I like the voice, so I guess I'm going to keep on reading it. I'm on page 101, so I'm kind of at the point where I feel like, yeah, I probably have enough momentum that I'll keep reading it. Took me a while to get my head around everything, but I won't let this, if I don't finish it, I won't let this be the only Siri Hustvedt novel that I try, because there's just something about this writer that has drawn me in. I know she's known for the book called The Blazing World. So, and then also something called The Summer Without Men. This just happened to be the one that was on the shelf, so I picked this one up. Yeah, The Blazing World was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. 2 that I have here that I just happen to have out of the library, but it just lines up so well with, called August, translated Women in Translation Month. But I had started, and I will continue after I'm done with these books. I'll continue the other Vigdis Hjorth that I picked up called Long Live the Post Horn. I read Is My Mother Dead? What is her other book that I just read that I think was on the International Booker that I loved? Well, this is about Eleanor, a frosty and detached PR consultant. She hasn't been feeling herself lately. She's deeply ambivalent about her boyfriend. Someone at her work vanishes, and her boss is like beside himself about it, very torn up. And because this person is missing, she finds herself working on one of his assignments. So she gets the file. And so now she's working with the Norwegian Post and Communications Union. And here's an inspiring story of one undelivered letter. And then this brings her a little bit more energy, a little bit more joy as she's on this assignment. That's all I know. I just read the first like 30 pages and I thought, well, I'll keep on going for now. This is something I'll start afterwards. And then The Road to the City. This is the newly published storybook version by New Directions of this Natalia Ginzburg. It has a new translator, which Mooks and Grapes podcast are very excited about. That's why I picked this version up. The translator is Gina Alhadeff, translated from the Italian. I don't know anything about this book. It says, a magnificently stark book. How is it that Natalia Ginzburg floods the smallness of one poor, muddled provincial life with such beauty? And there's a Rachel Cusk blurb, but I can't really read it because there's a sticker. An almost unbearably intimate novella, The Road to the City concentrates on a young woman feeling her way through life. Just what I need from Natalia Ginzburg. I mean, I can't wait to get to this. So that'll be next week maybe, or after I'm going to finish Drabble pretty soon, and then I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Time will tell. Before I go, I wanted to tell you what I'm about to pick up at the library as far as holds go, because there's some exciting things. What I have held for me, is Your Love Is Not Good by Johanna Hedva. Johanna Hedva is a Korean-American multimedia artist. She's tried to write a book before. I've heard an interview of her. She's super interesting to me. I've taken a look at her, I think it was her Instagram or something, and I loved the interview. It was on the podcast Between the Covers, so check that out. And I don't know if I'm going to connect with this book or not. It is about an artist of color becoming obsessed with a white model in a novel with the glamour of Clarice Lispector and the viscerality of Hong Kong. And I have the new Tessa Hadley short story collection coming. I don't know how I'm going to get along with it, because I'm going to harken back to the fact that I don't really read short stories, but I read her book Free Love, and it was one of those things where I wasn't really thrilled with it while I was reading it. I appreciated it more after I read it. So we'll see. It's called After the Funeral and Other Stories. And then I have a book that I think I heard about from Sean the Book Maniac recently, called All Down Darkness Wide. It's a memoir by Sean Hewitt. It's an Irish author, winner of the Rooney Prize and named Best Book of 2022. When Sean Hewitt meets Elias, the two fall headlong into a love story, but Elias struggles with severe mental illness. They soon come face to face with crisis. I don't know whether I can read a book like that. It might be a little too much, but I thought I would let you know that I'm going to take a look at it. Something that I'm looking forward to by Maud Ventura is My Husband. In this suspenseful and darkly funny debut novel, a sophisticated Frenchwoman spends her life obsessing over her perfect husband. But can their marriage survive her passionate love? I don't know. It looks really interesting. I think I saw this in The New Yorker. And then two more. I have Cleopatra and Frankenstein. That book was all over the place last year or something, by Coco Mellors. So I'm not going to talk about that here. I'm going to try it. I don't have any idea whether I'll get on with it. But I did want to tell you about two more that are coming. The Cat Who Saved Books by Sosuke Natsukawa. It was written in 2021. Apparently, this author is like the #1 best-selling author in Japan. And this book is about a high school student named Rintaro Natsuki. He's about to close the secondhand bookstore he inherited from his grandfather. A talking cat appears with an unusual request, and it's got the most darling cat on the front. Look this book up and take a look. I have other ones coming that I don't know will be there at the time that I pick them up, but I just wanted to tell you about those. I'll be dipping into them and trying them and seeing what works out. So thanks for hanging in there with me on this catch up. I, of course, want to know all about what your July was like, what you're looking forward to in August, especially about the Women in Translation books that you're looking forward to. And I hope to see you on the next one.